Hello everybody, welcome to the second lesson of our Adobe Builder Basics video course. And if you missed the first one, feel free to watch the video because in the first one we covered like quite the basics of creating the Builder applications, and today it will be much more interesting because today we will do we will work with Adobe Builder actions. So the actions are technically the location where you save in and you manage and hold your business logic. So that's literally your JavaScript code which doing the operations you want to do. And without wasting too much time, I would propose let's directly jump to the code. If you remember, we ended up on having Hello World application deployed, which contain a pure HTML file, and now we want to define our actions. So let's build some JavaScript function that will be executed into the Adobe Runtime. And to do it, you have to change your app config YAML file. You define it the packages, it's your extension name, you can call it like simple app. You define in the license, actions, so that literally the JavaScript file that holds your business logic. In our case, let's call it hello. It's located in the folders and you have responsible JavaScript file. We have here quite interesting points which are quite important when you develop in the builder modules. One of them is a web, another one is require Adobe auth true or false. But let's start one after another. So we created the new actions. I already have it. So let's create a new folder, call it actions, hello. Then let's make new file, index.js. If you're still coming from Adobe Commerce World, that's more or less your controller, which holds all logic. Again, as we build it today, the basics, so the minimum valuable product, you just need to have the main function there, which parameters which the system received, and then you do the return of the data you want to. So you have a return, you define the status code, headers, and a body, and that's like some simple response from Adobe Builder action. And that's it. Those two files are enough. And what we can do again, we can run IO app deploy, but in this case with actions, so just do an app deploy. And let's see what will happen. So our application is being deployed, and now we have a bit more data. So first of all, we still have our URL, which is a front-end URL we already saw. But additionally, now we have a web action. Web action defined because web defined, yes. The web action means you can open it in your browser. So you're receiving the URL, this URL is accessible in the browser and you can open it. If you define in the web to no, then action will be deployed as not available through a browser and it just will be available into the Adobe Runtime. You can call it for sure, but not from the browser anymore, only from the CLI. So, and that's our action that's been deployed. We can open it. And here is it. So that's what is returned as we define it. Where was it? Here we define some headers, body, and body also includes all parameters. I specially added them so you see which parameters are coming by default. So that's how they are. You have some headers here, which you can use if you want to. You have a timestamp, that's what we defined, and we have a message. Here is our message, hello world from Adobe Builder action. And that's it. So that's a minimum what you have to do to build your application. And now you already can build anything you want here. I mean, you can create any logic you want to, call external APIs, call Adobe Commerce, and so on and so on. One small add-on, in case in the future you have a lot of actions, because you build in the big applications. Also during the deployment, you can define action and tell hello, what is our name? Now we have, simple app, hello. And it will deploy only one particular action. So the same as before, you will save a lot of time during the deployment. But By the way, no action been deployed because there are no changes appear, and that's another one good point. You have to do force deploy if you want to fully redeploy your action. That's one point. In this case, as you see before, when I run just say app deploy, it's haven't done anything, no action deployed for application. But if I run with force deploy, it's redeployed the app for me. Also quite important point, if you're working quite a lot with a builder, you may need to clean up the whole action set. So what you can do AO app undeploy, which will undeploy your application. So by removing the whole actions that's been deployed. As you can see here, it's undeploying an action simple app hello and deploying the whole package and then done. And if I will open it now, you will see that request resource does not exist. So the action is not there anymore. Let's deploy it back. As you also can see, if I refresh the web, it's also not available. So it's undeploying everything. And now when I deployed only action, this one is available and app, the front end is still not. Cool, that was easy, right? So that was the basics of what you need to do just to start to work with your own module. So now, as we're already on action area, let's talk about environment variables. And we have here this N file which been created when you initialize the project, when you do an AO app use, which is fetching the runtime information from the Adobe Runtime for your particular application. Well, what you can do in the future also, if you have some secrets, some connection API keys, you can add them here. Very important point, this file never have to be deployed into the version control, so it shall not be part of your Git repository. But we can have some kind of test variable here and call it hello world variable. So this variable is now added here, how to receive it within your action. For that, you need to extend your appconfig YAML file. And you have to extend it with inputs. So you define the inputs here. And then you just define the test var coming from, from test var. In this case, it's taking this variable and defining it as a value for this variable that will be available into the params. And I will show you that. You can also rename it. You can make test var modified. Then it will, let's do like this, and then let's make test var defined. That will be hello world action variable. As example, right? So we added two variables here. One is coming from the environment file, another one is value coming directly from here. Let's redeploy our application. And now let's open our deployed action. Now, if you'll go to params here, you will see we have test parameter that we defined ourselves, and another one which came from the environment file. That's the way how you can control the parameters. And if you will not define them here, they will not appear in params itself. So you have to do it for the variables you want to use in your action. Now, authorization. As you can see, I open this URL, and I also can open it. And I also can open it in an incognito window, and it will work because it's not require any authorization. It's publicly available, and you can use it. For sure, if you want to build some backend action, you need to authorize it. So you need to be sure that your action is not exposable outside and it's secured and so on. You can for sure build your own authorization. Nobody block you from that. You can use some SSO connection. You can use bearer token or auth, whatever you want to add there, you can add. You also can use Adobe authorization for that, which will make it a bit easier, so you don't need to worry about authorization, and everybody who has an access to Adobe organization will have access to the action, for example. To do it, you can already guess, you have to require Adobe auth true. And if you will do it, and if you will redeploy it, when you will open an action, you will see that cannot authorize request, missing authorization header. So at this point, you cannot access the function anymore. But also, like, despite of the way you can implement all other authorization patterns, you can also implement Adobe auth here. Let me go quickly to the Adobe application interface itself. As you can see here, what you can add here, you can add the API for our staging environment, and you can do IO management API. In this case, this API will add auth to server authorization layer or authentication layer, and you will receive the keys which you can later use to authorize against your application. So that's more like server-to-server connection. And if you go here to the credentials, you can see the set of credentials you can later use for obtain the authorization token to access your application. So how to do it, I will forward you to the official documentation. We will not do it today for generate server-to-server access token in a builder action. That's already a bit more advanced one. That's why it's out of the basic scope. But you can just follow this documentation how to do it, and as you can see, you can use those. And as you can see, you can use those credentials here, defining them, and then there is an example of the JavaScript function that's doing the call. So, but instead of building the whole authorization flow of our action, we can temporarily just generate an access token here. It will die after some time, so that's not a production ready solution, but you can do it at least for testing. And then you can, you can also generate it just by CRL command if you don't want to hit this button always. So theoretically, you can just take the CRL command and build the same functionality within your action, how to obtain the token. And that's how the example documentation I showed you is done. But yeah, you can use the generated token, and then we take in this URL command, which I had here prepared. So we're just doing location, define the URL of our action, just copy it from here. Then you get in the token, which you generate in generate access token section, copy it, paste it here, and then just execute it. Cool. Yep, here's it. And yeah, that's our action. The same output you just saw before. Let's maybe for a second just come back to our server-to-server authorization. What you can see here, you have the token generation that just for the test purposes here have a client ID and secret. You also have the scopes here. The scopes are defined into which Adobe scope or which APIs your token has an access to. So in our case, it's, let's say, IO management. So it's management of adobeio runtime actions. But in the future, when you will start to add, let's say, Adobe Commerce SaaS, you will have another scope here for the SaaS. If you add some another APIs, you will have another APIs. What I would also recommend you to take as a homework, there is a command where you can see the actions, activations, and a list of them. So first of all, you can invoke your action as example. Let's do it, by the way. So let's do it. You have your web action set to no. So now it's not a web action, and we are redeploying everything. And after we redeployed it, we see we have a non-web action. Let's try to open it. And now you have username and password because it's not an action you allow to call into the browser. Resource, authorization request, blah, blah, blah. How to invoke this action if you want to test it, for example. You can do it from the terminal. So you can do AO, RT, action invoke. And then define in the action name. And in our case, it's this one, simple app hello. And then you see the activation ID. So activation ID is the invocation of the action. So it's made something and tell you, okay, cool, I did it. Let's do the result. And as a result, you see that's a result of our action activation. You can have also, like the small life hack. If you go into the AO and then you call RT, for example, so only the first part of the command, you will see all available commands which you can call the next. So I guess it's quite standard, but if you first work in, or like if you as me came from Adobe Commerce, PHP world, so I'm also learning such basic stuff. So as example, we have action, runtime action, and then list. And then the list of our action, we have the hello world and then secure hello world. Yeah, and then you can invoke them and play around with them. So, and there are like a lot of other commands, and I would, as I say, there's a small homework, just take it with you, go through, you may find something interesting or learn something new. I'll not go today through the whole of them. And I guess at this point that's it for the second part. We play today without an action, we define them as web, yes, no, we check the authorization flow, we know the minimum required, the data you need to build when you create a new action. As I said, why I tried to do it in this manner, because if you're doing AO app init, which recommended in every documentation as a starter steps, you will get a lot of files and you never know what exactly and what really you required to run an action, and if you really need all this stuff there. So yeah. If you enjoyed, I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.